The rancher spent his last dollar to free the veiled stranger. Then she revealed why the town feared her. The woman beneath the black veil did not cry when the crowd laughed at her. That frightened Wyatt Hale more than tears would have. She stood on a raised wagon bed in the center of Ash Hollow, her wrists bound loosely with rope and her shoulders bent against the bitter Wyoming wind. A long dark veil covered her hair and most of her face. Only the pale curve of her chin showed beneath it. Around her, townsmen gathered with their hands in their coat pockets. Women watched from the boardwalk outside the mercantile. A few boys climbed onto barrels for a better view. Nobody asked whether she was hungry. Nobody asked why she had been brought there. Sheriff Amos Vane struck a small iron bell with the handle of his knife. "Listen close," he called. "This woman has no family willing to claim her and no money to pay what she owes this town. Whoever takes responsibility for her may settle the matter today." A low murmur traveled through the crowd. Wyatt remained near the hitching rail, one gloved hand resting on his horse's saddle. He had ridden into Ash Hollow for lamp oil, flour, and nails. The winter had taken 2 calves, broken part of his roof, and left his small ranch poorer than it had been in years. Inside his coat pocket rested $1 silver. It was all he had left until spring. On the wagon, the woman shifted her weight. A strand of rope scraped across her wrist. She flinched but made no sound. Sheriff Vane smiled as though silence proved guilt. "You have all heard the stories," he continued. "She entered Ash Hollow under a false name. She asked questions about respectable men. She carried papers that did not belong to her. Since no relative has come forward, the town council has agreed that someone may take her into service." Wyatt's jaw tightened. Service. It was a clean word for an ugly thing. A miner near the front raised 2 copper coins. Laughter followed. Another man offered half a sack of oats, then bowed dramatically toward the woman as if he were choosing livestock. She lowered her head further. Wyatt looked from her bound hands to Sheriff Vane's polished badge. He had known men like the sheriff before, men who spoke loudly because they feared quiet questions. "Does she have a name?" Wyatt asked. The crowd turned. Sheriff Vane narrowed his eyes. "That is not your concern, Hale." "It became my concern when you tied her hands." A few people stepped back. Wyatt was not known for causing trouble, but neither was he known for walking away from it. The sheriff climbed onto the wagon bed. "This woman is dangerous." "She does not look dangerous. You cannot see her face." Wyatt's gaze moved to the veil. "Maybe she has a reason for hiding it." The woman's head lifted slightly. It was the first sign that she had heard him. Sheriff Vane struck the bell again. "Final offer." Silence settled over Ash Hollow. The wind pushed dust beneath the boardwalk. A horse stamped near the blacksmith shop. Somewhere inside the hotel kitchen, a pan fell and clattered against the floor. Wyatt thought of the flour he needed. He thought of the hole above his bed where snow had drifted onto his blanket 3 nights earlier. Then he remembered his mother, years ago, standing outside a bank while men discussed her debts as if she were not there. He reached into his pocket. The silver dollar felt colder than the air. When he placed it on the sheriff's table, the sound was small, but every person in the street heard it. Sheriff Vane stared at the coin. "That is your last dollar," the mercantile owner said. Wyatt did not look at him. "I know." The sheriff gave a thin smile. "You understand what you are accepting?" "No." A few men laughed. Wyatt stepped closer to the wagon. "But I understand what I am ending." The laughter faded. Sheriff Vane picked up the dollar and bit its edge. Then he tossed the rope's loose end toward Wyatt. "She is yours." Wyatt left the rope lying in the dust. He climbed onto the wagon slowly, stopping several feet from the woman. Her breathing changed beneath the veil. Her fingers curled inward as though she expected him to grab her. Instead, Wyatt removed his knife and placed it on the wooden boards between them. "I need to cut the rope," he said. "May I come closer?" The crowd became strangely still. The woman did not answer at first. Then she gave one careful nod. Wyatt moved only as near as he needed. He cut through the rope without touching her skin. When the fibers loosened, she pulled her hands against her chest and rubbed the red marks around her wrists. "You can step down whenever you are ready," he said. Sheriff Vane scoffed. "Hale, take the veil off. The agreement requires you to inspect what you purchased." Wyatt turned so sharply that the sheriff stopped smiling. "I purchased nothing." He picked up the severed rope and threw it at Vane's boots. "I paid for the town to release her." The woman looked at Wyatt through the dark cloth. He could not see her eyes, but he felt the weight of them. Wyatt stepped down from the wagon and walked to his horse. He loosened the blanket tied behind the saddle and placed it across the rail. "You can take the horse," he said without turning around. "My ranch is 6 miles north. There is food and a stove. You may stay tonight or you may ride wherever you choose." A long moment passed. Then he heard her climb down. Her steps stopped behind him. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft that the wind nearly carried it away. "No one has ever asked what I chose before." Wyatt closed his eyes for one brief second. Something in those words reached a place inside him that winter had not been able to freeze. He turned, but before he could answer, Sheriff Vane spoke from the wagon. "You will regret this, Hale." The woman's shoulders stiffened. Wyatt noticed. So did the sheriff. That was when Wyatt understood that this had never been about debt. The sheriff was afraid of her. Wyatt took the reins and began walking north, leaving the saddle for the veiled stranger. After a few steps, he heard the horse move behind him. She had chosen to follow. They traveled in silence until Ash Hollow disappeared beyond the ridge. Snow began falling through the pine trees, gathering on Wyatt's hat and the woman's dark veil. Near dusk, his cabin came into view beside a narrow creek. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. The barn door leaned crookedly on one hinge. Wyatt opened the cabin and stepped aside. Inside stood one bed, one table, and a cold iron stove. "The bed is yours," he said. "I will sleep in the barn." The woman remained at the doorway. "You paid your last dollar," she whispered. "What do you expect from me?" "Nothing." She looked toward him. Even through the veil, he could feel her disbelief. Wyatt set his knife on the table and moved away from it. "You are not trapped here." For the first time, her trembling hand rose toward the veil, but before she could remove it, a horse galloped somewhere beyond the trees. Both of them turned toward the sound. The rider did not approach the cabin. He passed slowly along the ridge, then disappeared into the falling snow. A folded paper had been nailed to Wyatt's fence post. On it were 5 words written in thick black ink. "Send the woman back by morning." Wyatt pulled the paper from the fence post before the snow could soak through it. The black ink had bled slightly around the edges, but the warning remained clear. "Send the woman back by morning." He folded the paper once and slipped it inside his coat. Behind him, the veiled stranger stood in the cabin doorway, one hand gripping the frame. She had not stepped fully outside, yet her eyes seemed fixed on the ridge where the rider had vanished. "You know who sent it," Wyatt said. She lowered her head. The snow gathered along the shoulders of her dress. Wyatt waited. He had already learned that silence around her was not emptiness. It was a wall built one painful brick at a time. At last, she whispered, "Sheriff Vane does not send warnings himself." "Then who does?" Her hand tightened around the doorframe. "A man named Gideon Rusk." Wyatt knew the name. Everyone within 50 miles knew it. Rusk owned the largest cattle company in the territory. He owned warehouses, freight wagons, and half the water rights along the southern valley. Men called him generous because he sometimes paid for a church roof or sent flour to struggling families. They said less about the ranches he had taken. Wyatt stepped closer, but not too close. "What does Gideon Rusk want from you?" The woman looked toward the darkening trees. "Something I carried into Ash Hollow." "Do you still have it?" She did not answer. That was answer enough. Wyatt glanced toward the barn. His mare had begun shifting nervously inside, disturbed by the scent of the unknown rider. "We should get indoors." He built the fire while the woman remained near the wall. She watched every movement, especially when he opened a cupboard or reached inside his coat. Wyatt placed bread, dried apples, and a small piece of smoked meat on the table. You should eat." She stared at the food. "It is not payment," he added, her eyes lifted beneath the veil. "I know what you think," Wyatt said. "I spent $1, so you expect a price to follow." Her silence grew heavier. He pulled out the second chair and sat on the far side of the room. "There is no price." For several minutes she did not move. Then she crossed the cabin and sat at the table. She ate slowly, taking small bites as though someone might suddenly take the plate away. Wyatt pretended not to notice. When the fire warmed the room, she finally raised both hands to the dark cloth. The veil slipped from her head. Wyatt had expected a scar, perhaps some mark the town had used to shame her. There was a pale burn along the side of her temple, partly hidden beneath chestnut hair. It was old and uneven, stretching toward her left cheek. But it was not the mark that held his attention. It was the way she watched him. She had removed the veil, yet she still looked ready to hide. "My name is Nora Bell," she said. Wyatt nodded. "Nora." She waited for his eyes to turn away in disgust or remain too long in curiosity. He did neither. He simply reached for the coffee pot. "Would you like some?" The question seemed to confuse her. "Yes." As he poured, she touched the edge of the scar. "The fire happened when I was 14. Wyatt placed the cup before her. "You do not have to explain it." "I know." She looked down at the steam rising from the coffee. "But I want to." Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. Nora told him her father had worked as a bookkeeper for Gideon Rusk. For years, he kept records of cattle sales, land transfers, and water contracts. At first, he believed Rusk was only a hard businessman. Then he found false deeds. Ranchers had signed loans they could never repay because the terms had been changed after their names were written. Water rights had been stolen through forged seals. Families had been forced from land their children had expected to inherit. "My father copied the records," Nora said. "He planned to take them to the territorial judge." "What happened?" Her fingers closed around the cup. "The office burned before he could leave." Wyatt looked toward the scar. Nora nodded once. "My father died inside. I escaped through a back window." "And the copies?" "I found part of them beneath the floorboards afterward." Wyatt leaned forward. "That is what Rusk wants." "Yes." "Why did you go to Ash Hollow?" "There was a former clerk there who could prove the seals were false. He promised to speak." "But Sheriff Vane found you first." "He found the clerk first." The words were quiet, but Wyatt heard the truth inside them. "Is the clerk dead?" "I do not know. He disappeared." The fire snapped. Wyatt rose and crossed to the window. Beyond the glass, the snowfall had thickened. Any tracks left by the rider would soon disappear. "Where are the papers now?" Nora stood. For a moment she hesitated. Then she walked to the hem of her dress and pulled loose several careful stitches. From inside the lining she removed a narrow leather packet. She placed it on the table. Wyatt opened it. Inside were 3 folded pages marked with names, dates, property lines, and sums of money. At the bottom of one page was Gideon Rusk's signature. On another was Sheriff Amos Vane's. Wyatt read the names of families he recognized. One belonged to a widow whose ranch had been taken the previous spring. Another belonged to Wyatt himself. His eyes stopped. Hale Ranch, Cedar Pass. Transfer approved upon death of owner. Wyatt looked up slowly. "My ranch was never sold." Nora's voice trembled. "It will be." He read the line again. The document was dated 2 months earlier. His land had already been promised to Gideon Rusk. The cabin seemed suddenly smaller. Wyatt remembered broken fences that had never broken before, missing cattle, a fire in his hay shed. He had blamed winter, bad luck, and his own failing ranch. Perhaps none of it had been luck. Nora took one step back. "You should send me away." Wyatt folded the papers carefully. "Why?" "Because now you know what standing beside me will cost." He looked at the woman before him. She had been mocked, bound, and hidden beneath a veil, yet she had carried proof through snow and fear while powerful men hunted her. Wyatt placed the documents back into the leather packet. "They were coming for my land before I met you." That does not mean you must risk your life. No. He held her gaze. It means you did not bring the danger, you revealed it. Something changed in Nora's face. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the first small space where trust could grow. A hard knock struck the cabin door, both of them froze, 3 knocks followed. Wyatt reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. "Who is it?" he called. A woman's voice answered through the storm. Wyatt opened the door. "I came from Ash Hollow." He recognized the voice of Agnes Ward, the town schoolteacher. Wyatt opened the door just wide enough to see her. Agnes stumbled inside, covered in snow, her face pale with fear. "They arrested the blacksmith," she said. "He saw Sheriff Vane place Nora on that wagon. He was going to testify." Nora stepped forward. "Is he alive?" "For now." Agnes looked between them. "But that is not why I rode here." She reached into her coat and pulled out a blood-stained sheriff's badge. "Amos Vane was found beside the South Road an hour ago." Wyatt's grip tightened around the rifle. Agnes swallowed. "And before he died, someone carved Nora Bell's name into the handle of his knife." Nora stared at the knife in Agnes Ward's hand. Her name had been carved deeply into the wooden handle, each letter cut with enough care to make the lie look planned. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Nora stepped backward until her shoulders touched the cabin wall. "He said he would make people fear my name," she whispered. "I thought he meant more posters, more stories." Wyatt set his rifle on the table. "Nora, look at me." "She did. You did not kill Amos Vane." "The town will not care." "I will." Pain crossed her face. "You are one man." "So was the person who put that dollar on the table." The word stopped her. Agnes removed her wet coat and moved closer to the fire. "There may be more than one person willing to speak now. The blacksmith saw Gideon Rusk's men bring Nora into town. I saw Vane take the leather packet from her before the wagon gathering began." Nora touched the hidden seam in her dress. "He searched the wrong lining." Agnes nodded. "That is why they still need you." Wyatt unfolded the forged records. "We cannot hide here." Nora looked toward the window. "If we go back, they will hang the sheriff's death around my neck before anyone reads those papers." "Then we do not go to Ash Hollow first." Wyatt pointed to a name written near the bottom of the final page. Judge Holly's Grant, the same man whose seal had been copied onto several false transfers. The territorial judge lived in Millstone, a day's hard ride east. Agnes studied the worsening storm. "Rusk's men will watch the main road." Wyatt folded the papers and handed them to Nora. "Then we take the old logging trail." They left before midnight. Agnes rode toward a neighboring ranch to gather the families named in the records. Wyatt and Nora traveled east beneath a sky heavy with snow. For the first few hours, Nora said nothing. She kept one hand inside her coat, holding the leather packet close to her heart. Near dawn, Wyatt's horse slipped on a frozen slope. The animal recovered, but Wyatt was thrown hard against the ground. Pain traveled through his injured shoulder as he tried to rise. Nora dismounted immediately. "Stay still." "I can ride." "You can barely breathe." She knelt beside him and examined the old wound beneath his coat. The cloth had opened again, dark with blood. Wyatt watched her hands. They trembled, yet they did not stop. "You are not leaving me here," he said. Nora tied a clean strip of fabric around his shoulder. "You did not leave me on that wagon." "That was different." No, her eyes met his. It was exactly the same. She helped him stand and guided him onto the gentler horse. Then she took the reins and led them through the snow. By late afternoon, the roofs of Millstone appeared beyond the valley. They had almost reached the courthouse when 6 riders blocked the road. Gideon Rusk sat at the center. He was older than Nora had described, with silver hair, a fine black coat, and the calm face of a man accustomed to obedience. "You have caused considerable trouble," he said. Nora moved slightly in front of Wyatt. Rusk smiled. "So the frightened girl has learned to stand." "She was always standing," Wyatt said, Men like you simply kept pushing her down. Rusk's expression hardened. He extended one gloved hand. Give me the records, Miss Bell. I will tell the authorities you were confused. Sheriff Vane's death can be blamed on a drifter. Nora looked at the leather packet. For a moment, Wyatt feared she might surrender it to save him. Then she lifted her chin. My father died protecting these names. Rusk sighed. Your father died because he forgot his place. Nora's face became still. Wyatt saw grief move through her, but something stronger followed it. No, she said. He died because he remembered what was right. Before Rusk could answer, wagon wheels sounded behind them. Agnes Ward appeared at the head of a long line of ranchers, widows, workers, and townspeople. The Ash Hollow blacksmith sat beside her with bruises across his face. Behind them rode two territorial marshals. Gideon Rusk turned pale. Judge Hollis Grant stepped from the courthouse with several clerks at his side. What is the meaning of this? The judge demanded. Nora walked past Rusk. She did not hurry. She did not hide her scar. She climbed the courthouse steps and placed the leather packet in the judge's hands. These are copies of false land transfers, altered debts, and stolen water agreements. Your seal appears on them, sir, but I believe it was forged. Judge Grant opened the first page. His expression changed. Rusk dismounted. Those papers were stolen by an unstable woman. The blacksmith called from the wagon. I watched Vane take orders from your foreman. Another rancher raised his voice. My signature is false. Then a widow stepped forward. So is my husband's. One voice became three. Three became 10. The truth did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like people finally deciding they were no longer alone. The marshals arrested Rusk before sunset. His foreman confessed that Vane had been killed after threatening to reveal the scheme. Nora's name had been carved into the knife to silence her forever. The accusations against her were dismissed. The stolen properties were placed under review, including Wyatt's ranch. When the courthouse emptied, evening light settled across the steps. Nora stood beside Wyatt, watching families gather around records they had believed were lost forever. You chose me when you knew nothing about me, she said. Wyatt shook his head. I chose to cut a rope. That changed everything. No, he looked at her gently. What you did afterward changed everything. Nora reached into her pocket and removed the silver dollar Sheriff Vane had taken from Wyatt. A marshal had found it among the dead sheriff's belongings. She placed it in Wyatt's palm. He closed her fingers around it instead. It belongs to you. I was never worth $1. Wyatt stepped closer. You were never for sale. Tears filled her eyes, but this time she did not hide them. Then why did you choose me? He looked at the scar she no longer covered, the brave woman who had led him through the snow, and the steady hands that had carried the truth farther than fear could follow. Because everyone else was looking at what they could take from you. His voice softened. I wanted to know what might happen if someone finally stood beside you. Months later, two chairs sat on the porch of Hale Ranch. The roof no longer leaked. The fence stood straight. A small schoolroom had opened in the old barn, where Nora helped ranch families read contracts before signing them. Above the cabin door hung a silver dollar, not as the price of a woman, as proof that one small act of courage could expose a powerful lie, return stolen homes, and begin a love neither of them had believed they deserved. And whenever Nora looked at it, Wyatt reminded her of the truth she had finally learned. She had not been chosen because she was helpless. She had been chosen because she had always been worth seeing.